Welcome to Gameday. In this video, we're gonna show you how I tuned a subscriber's PC, resulting in 25% better performance in Star Citizen, and compare his tuned system against the latest Ryzen 7700X based on Tenpoundfortytwo's CPU review, and match it against the 3900K with tuned memory. What is great about Star Citizen as a benchmarking game is that if you have one weak link in your system, the game will let you know very quickly by poor performance, making you think that it is the developer's fault you have bad FPS. The system we're tuning today was provided by a subscriber. I got an email saying, "Hey Gameday, can you please tune my PC? I'm looking for silky smooth performance in Star Citizen, and I saw your video on how you can improve performance by tuning your RAM. Can you help me improve my system?" We emailed back and forth, and I decided it would be a good idea to see how far I can push somebody else's system that is not my own and see the performance benefit there, especially with a system that has completely different specs. The subscriber's PC is equipped with a 10th generation i5 10600KF, which is a 6-core processor from 2022, which is almost 3 years old. It is equipped with 16GB of RAM from Kingston Hyper X, clocked at 3600 MHz with CL17, which is the XMP profile it came with. The GPU is an AMD RTX 6800. For the full specs of all other parts, please take a look in the description below. In this video, please keep in mind that this subscriber's PC costs less than my 4090 altogether. And this is because this PC is a mid-range build in the 1500 to 1600 range. And we're gonna show you what a 4-step tuning can do to this subscriber's PC, which will boost the performance of the system, which will also benefit other games besides Star Citizen. The subscriber gave me access to his PC via TeamViewer, which allowed me to remotely install the programs I needed to monitor my overclock, but also make sure that I got the right settings in place when I inserted the settings in the BIOS. He shared his BIOS settings with me via his smartphone so he could share the screen. This allowed me to instruct him on what BIOS settings he needed to effectively overclock the CPU, but also tune the RAM. This took a couple of hours to complete, but once it was complete, he was very happy with the results. So to begin with, I start with optimizing the subscriber's Windows. This is where I remove all the bloatware that he has installed, but also make sure that the game optimized settings that are available in Windows are on to ensure that the Windows is not draining any CPU or RAM cycles when he's playing Star Citizen. RAM is still very sensitive to background operations because that requires the CPU to call the RAM for specific partitions on the RAM system which take up cycles, which means that the performance in the RAM can be degraded by background apps. If you're interested in Windows optimization, I have left some Windows optimization tips in the description below. After the Windows optimization, we began overclocking the CPU from 4.5 GHz all cores to 4.9 GHz all cores. This is a 10% frequency boost, which will improve key single core performance and multi-core performance across the board and will benefit Star Citizen and other CPU-bound games by up to 10%. We did try 5 GHz, however, the CPU could not be stable at that frequency. With every CPU, there is a form of silicon lottery, which means that some can overclock at higher, some can do lower. In this case, this was the highest frequency we could get stable for the subscriber system. For the GPU, we used more power tools to flash the BIOS to unlock the power limit for the core clock. This pushed the RTX 6800 from 2150 to 2500 MHz on the core, and the memory from 2000 to 2200. Finally, we tuned the most fun part of any system, which is the RAM. We tuned his memory from 3600 MHz, CL17, to 4100 MHz. You can see the before and after pictures here. This results in a 16 to 17% lower latency and an increase in the read and write and copy bandwidth. In the IDA results, the most important metric is the latency. The second important latency is the bandwidth, because all games benefit from lower latencies. However, some games, like potentially Star Citizen, benefit from both, which also includes the higher bandwidth. To validate if Star Citizen benefit from higher bandwidth or just the latency, we're going to do an in-depth analysis on that later once we get hands on DDR5, which usually has much higher bandwidth than DDR4. Every timing has been manually tuned. Note that by copying these timings will not guarantee you the best performance and will not guarantee you stability either, depending on your own combination of motherboards, RAM sticks, and CPU. So when you think about memory tuning, it's like a unique fingerprint. Each system has their own place where it's the most stable and has the highest performance. You can use this as a guidance of where you might want to begin when thinking about tuning your own memory sticks. For benchmarking, I instructed the subscriber to do the Lorville run using Capframe X to capture the results before I tuned his system. After his tune was complete, I instructed him to do the Lorville run again. He gave me 4 Lorville runs so I could take the average of those results. And as a bonus, the subscriber also wanted to see what would happen if he had run his memory at the default BIOS setting, which was 2400 MHz. So before everything, before the final tuning, we ran 4 runs of 2400 MHz, which is his default RAM setting on his 10600K CPU. Now, this is a very common setting for DDR4 setups who are not enabling XMP, or it's also a very common setting for pre-built systems. The setting for this is very high clouds and every other setting maxed, including motion blur, with field of view at 100 at 1080p. Alright, looking at the results, we can see that enabling XMP, which he had done, is very valuable because we're looking at roughly 10% performance difference between having XMP on or off. But when we tune your systems, we're noticing that the performance improvement, at least in the minimum lows, is above 10% gains. Now, it might not look much, but if we dig a little bit deeper into the results, we can see that the GPU is now holding his PC back. This is because at very high cloud settings, we are now GPU bottlenecked according to Capframe X 87% of the time. So to truly see the performance benefits of the memory tune, we have to remove the GPU boundness of the system. So there's 2 ways we can do it. We can 1, reduce the clouds, or 2, render the scene at a lower resolution. There are 2 options. So for this, we did actually both. So what we're seeing here is the additional results of running this tune system at 720p using lossless upscaling, or running at 1080p with no clouds. As we can see now, we're no longer GPU bound, and we can actually see the performance benefit right here, which is 25% more FPS, going from 3600 MHz XMP to 4100 MHz with tuned timings. This is a massive performance improvement overall just by tuning the memory. Put things into context, the subscriber also wanted to compare his results of the tuned system in comparison to Tenpoundfortytwo's benchmarks of different CPUs to see if there was a potential upgrade path he could take to get better performance if he decided to upgrade his CPU. To get the result, that meant that the subscriber had to do a rerun using Tenpoundfortytwo's benchmarking methodology of Lorville. Now, Tenpoundfortytwo has a slightly different setting, which is more optimum for most systems anyways, so that was pretty good in terms of running optimum graphic settings in Star Citizen. Now, his settings is set at quality at very high, scattered object distance at medium, terrain tessellation distance at medium, planet volumetric clouds at medium, and disabling motion blur altogether. Visually, there isn't that much of a visual difference between running his settings and running the settings at very high, which I have done on all my benchmarks, and that's specifically true when you're running at 1080p as well. So if you are struggling with being GPU bound, do consider running his settings, but also do consider using lossless scaling. In addition to the settings change, his methodology also includes doing a slightly different run of Lorville. The path is still the same, it goes all the way to terminal, but he also goes to the ship dealership. In addition, he looks a little bit different in his run when he is in the tube. So there's a slight difference there, and he's also not running in third person, he's running in first person. To see his full benchmarking run, if you want to copy it yourself and try it out, you can see the link in the description below where he shares the benchmarking run he is doing. Now, the subscriber did exactly the same run 3 times after watching the video, and you can see now the results of his tuned PC in relation to the Gameday Lorville run, where the settings were set at very high at 720p, lossless upscaling, in comparisons to the Tenpoundfortytwo Lorville run, where the settings were set at very high and medium at 1080p. Now, as you can see, is that both runs yields virtually the same performance. So both results are comparable because we are CPU bound in both scenarios, because the GPU never fully reaches 100%. With that in mind, we can now take the subscriber's tuned PC and put it into the context of the Tenpoundfortytwo recent review of the 7700X Ryzen 7. And in this review, we can also see the other CPUs he was comparing it against. Keep in mind that Tenpoundfortytwo is running a RTX 3080, which is a little bit more powerful than the RX 6800. This should not matter because they are both CPU bound, whether it's the RX 6800 or the 3080. To see Tenpoundfortytwo full 7700X review, then you can see his link in the description below as a reference. Taking a look at the subscriber's tuned PC and we compare it to the 12th gen and 13th gen Intel CPUs, we can see that the tuned system has a comparable 1% lows, meanwhile the average is within 10% margin. This effectively means that the subscriber's PC got essentially a whole new upgrade, bringing it on par to a complete stock 13th and 12th gen 8-core Intel CPU. So this means that instead of spending additional money on a new motherboard and new CPU, the subscriber was able to tune his current system to be on par with a stock 12th gen and 13th gen CPU. This is effectively 3 generations worth of performance improvement just by tuning. With this information on hand, the subscriber's upgrade path has completely changed and he feels now more confident and comfortable staying with his current system for another couple of generations of CPU upgrades. He's obviously looking forward to the new 7700X 3D cache just to see what kind of performance it will be getting and how far that CPU can be pushed once it's also fully tuned to the max. But wait, there is more. If you came this far, you're going to be very surprised what you're about to see next. This analysis would not be complete if I did not include the optimized 3900K with tuned memory at 4100 MHz. So I had to do Tenpoundfortytwo's lobby run and I did it for 5 times with the 3900K to get the average results. I also include Tenpoundfortytwo's 7700X with the 4080 to compare the results. So what you're seeing here next is the exact same run of Tenpoundfortytwo of the 3900K with exact same settings. And what we're seeing here is that the 3900K beats all systems when it's tuned. With an average of 95 FPS and a 1% low of 56 FPS, the tuned 3900K completely wins over all stock Ryzen systems by a massive 23% on the 1% lows and 15% on the average, compared to the 7700X with RTX 4080. Looking at the GPU utilization, the 4090 is still being bottlenecked by the 3900K, and there is an additional 100% performance to be gained here. So in reality, this should be a card that can do over 200 FPS in 1080p. So what does this all mean? Once again, it goes back to the main point that the only thing that is not tuned is your system. And I say that in a tongue-in-cheek way, in the fact that obviously there's a lot more performance to be gained that the developers can bring. But the majority of the backlash developers get for shipping an unoptimized game isn't really justified when you look at it that a 3-year-old system can be tuned to match current gen stock systems, and that there are additional 20 to 30% to be gained by tuning your memory and overclocking your CPU. What we're seeing here is that most of the performance that people are complaining about with Star Citizen can be fixed to the point where the game becomes more than playable. For example, the 7700X, if I had my hands on it, I could probably tune it to get an additional 25%, and that means it will be better than the 1300K. Similarly with the 5800X, I could probably give it another 20 to 30% performance boost by tuning it. That also means when we get the 7800 3D cache, when it's stock, it will most likely perform equally to the 1300K tuned. That means we can probably unlock an additional 25% from the 7800 3D cache by tuning the system further, which means we will most likely be in the hundreds of 20 FPS on average using this Tenpoundfortytwo run. When we think about CPU kings, we cannot forget the queen in the system, which is the RAM. The RAM will always complement the CPU because that's the one that feeds the cores all the information it needs to compute at any given time. The 3900K is objectively faster in terms of compute power, but if you can't feed those cores with enough information, it will have less performance. As a recommendation, if you're considering building a new system, I highly recommend waiting for the 7800 3D cache to come out this February, and waiting for the tuned review of that system. We're also going to have to wait to see how the 3900K with DDR5 compares apples to apples on these runs. If you found this informative and you want to learn more about RAM tuning and its benefits, then check out this video. You will not be disappointed. It will show you different frequencies, how Star Citizen performs, and how it scales. And if you don't want to miss our next video, then do all the SEO stuff, hit the subscribe button, like, share, comment, tell me what you think, and we'll see you in the next one.